Hello, listener, and welcome to the very first episode of the Still Smiling Huddersfield Town podcast. It's Brady Frost, and I'm joined by my partner in crime, Mr. Tom Bradshaw. Tom, how you doing?
Brady, I am excellent. I'm so excited for this. What we're going to hear. Well, plot twist, we've already heard it, but we're gonna, it's gonna be so good, isn't it? Like, I'm buzzing. We've done a few already. We've got loads to come, hopefully. Yeah. How are you doing? You all right?
I'm good. I'm excited too. Because this is, we're doing something new. No more previewing games, although, thanks to everyone who did listen then. But yeah, we're excited because this is, I think, something a little bit more timeless that people are going to enjoy. This is the first episode of what we're going to call the My Town series. So we're going to speak to Huddersfield Town fans, former and current players, and others with a connection to the club as they relive their town, supporting the Terriers, town-following life, and we're going to ask them questions about their favourite and worst moments. It's kind of a, how would you describe it, Tom? Because I think this is the funny thing. I've had to describe it a lot in the run-up to this, and I don't think I've quite nailed it, so I'll put all the pressure on you.
I have said to a lot of people about it. I've led with it's very loosely based off desert island discs, but it's more football related. There is some music thrown in there, but it's not like, we're not gonna focus on that too much, but we have got a nice little kind of playlist that the people put together at the end. But yeah, that's kind of that's the vibe that I've been getting from it, and it's just hearing different stories, because there's so many town fans out there, and no matter like what game you're going to, I think it's amazing just hearing the different experiences of those games. Like, no one's really given us the same story yet, Brady. Do you know what I mean? Which is really exciting. So yeah, that's kind of a summing it up in a bad way, probably.
No, I think it's fair. Yeah, I think it's just like you said, trying to sell it. People might have seen our video, but I think it's just like perfect for any town fan to kind of remind themselves like why they fell in love with the club and like reminisce like the iconic moments. Because as you say, like obviously we all have our moments, but we really want to find out like why it's special to that person. And let's be honest, it's football is never stopping, and I think it's one of the reasons we wanted to do it, Tom, was to kind of look back and take stock, because you get bogged down with your Swansea away and or Shrewsbury this away, as it'll probably be this year, and it's 46 games, it's a long season, but things can seem like very intense, but actually there like you say, it's the memories you have going to the games, it's not always the result.
Yeah, exactly, Brady. I think just from mine and yours point of view, it's going to be a much nicer thing. You never know, Town might have an amazing season this year and we'll be like, classic. But yeah, I think the last 4 seasons has definitely drained us.
100%. But yeah, we do appreciate everyone who stuck with us for that, and we hope you enjoy this. So yeah, so as we said, this is the My Town series. So how this will work is we're going to have a guest every week, and we're going to ask them 9 questions about their favourite moments, their worst moments, and why it's their town or my town, as we're calling it. And Tom, we were thinking, we've got to get someone good for the first episode. We might tweak the questions slightly for different guests because based on their answers. So there'll be some that they always answer. There'll be some that are slightly different. But we were thinking, who's going to be? We have to get someone really good for the first episode, and I think we've nailed it.
I think you've got someone who, well, as you're going to hear, has absolutely bagload of stories, and he's been in and around Huddersfield Town, well, pretty much since he was able to kind of go to football games, wasn't it? So Are you going to say it? Because I think it's a coup. It's a summer signing that no one expected, in my opinion, for the first episode.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, go on then. You're letting me do it. It's the former. It's a name that people all know. It's the former Huddersfield Daily Examiner reporter Mel Booth. Mel, what a legend! He's covered the club for 4 decades as a reporter, from the 80s to the 2020. And yeah, he's just got so many stories, like you say, Tom. We're buzzing to have him. Everyone knows Mel, and he gave us so many great stories, like that. We can tell listeners, but there's some karaoke stories. There's some cornering Neil Warnock in the tunnel. He actually sat on the bench. There's just so many good things, and yeah, it's like you say, it's what a signing, Tom, for the first episode.
Massive. Do you know what though? I'm gonna just put it out there. It might disappoint a few people. We didn't talk about mullets for that long either. I think we only touched on his mullet. But I mean, it was such a good chat. Like Mel, I'm so grateful for him to kind of give his time for this and let us share the kind of his memories with him of town, because it's insane what he's kind of seen and been around. And I loved it, because I just remember growing up and reading the back of the Examiner. It was just all you read was Mel Booth, and then to just sit with him and hear these stories has been excellent.
Yeah, it really is. And I tell you what, we'll stop talking now and we'll cut to the first episode. Yeah, hope you guys enjoy it. This is episode 1 of the My Town series, and it's My Town, Mel Booth. In this episode, we're joined by Mel Booth, who's been following and covering town. He's been a town fan all his life, really, but he's covered the club from 1985 to 2020. Mel, thanks so much for joining Tom and I today. How are you doing, first of all?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Yeah, nice of you to invite me along. Thank you.
Well, we one of the first people we wanted on, Mel, because the word legend gets used a lot, but you are a town legend. I think it's fair to say. You don't have to say that, but we will say that on your behalf. So, yeah, Mel, I suppose the first question we wanted to ask before we get into some of the ones we've asked you to prep was, we touched on it there. You've supported the club all your life, but you covered the club for, like we said, 35 years. What was that like? Because I suppose it must be really interesting, because obviously we all have our tribalism as fans. And I understand, doing the job, you have to kind of be neutral and, maybe hear the club side more when you want to. Was that a bit of an interesting one? I know I've just kind of asked you to sum up 35 years in an answer, but
I mean, being a professional journalist, obviously it is different to being a fan, and you treat the day-to-day business differently. It's your job. Watching the matches is different as well. You're not leaping around in the press box. You're watching what's going on, and obviously prepping things for questions you're going to ask and everything else. So it's 2 totally different things. I mean, I did follow the club quite a bit before I, went into journalism, and I worked elsewhere, which also helped. So I worked away. I covered Barnsley Football Club for a little while, and then I worked at the Morning Telegraph in Sheffield. So we did all the South Yorkshire clubs. So I did a fair bit of Wednesday, Sheffield United, Chesterfield's 4th Division Championship campaign when John Duncan was the manager. I covered quite a bit of that. So I'd done a fair bit before I actually came to the Examiner. And I followed Paul Clark. When Paul left, I took over in 1985. And previous to that, it had been people like Martin Hardy, Alan Driscoll, who was Longfellow, you might have seen when you've been looking through the archives. And before that, Bill Mellington did a bit. And I even met Lewis Firth, who covered town in the 20s and 30s. He became sports editor of the Examiner as well. So it was nice to have people like that to talk to and just gauge a little bit about what it'd been like covering the club back in those days and what it meant to everyone, So I was very fortunate to have met people like that, but also have a bit of background knowledge about what it was, a bit of personal knowledge about what it was like to be a town fan anyway. So I hope over the years I was able to gauge that and give a fair reflection of things for everyone.
Yeah, you certainly did. I suppose, did you ever find yourself having to, maybe rein yourself in, or, readjust the first draft? Because, like you say, passions can run high.
Yeah, I was accused by more than one director of being too much like a fan. And so I think that was, when you, you push the right buttons, you get that sort of reaction. So I was happy that it meant I was doing a decent job for the fans, which back in those days, before the internet, mobile phones, all that sort of thing, we were the major link between the football club and the fans. So you got to recognise that responsibility and take it forward as best you can, create some good working relationships, hopefully good contacts, win their trust, and hopefully get the best stories out of the club that you could.
And like you say, it's such a big responsibility. I mean, even now, kind of being that local connection for the fans. Like, did you ever feel the pressure of that? Because, like you say, you're, particularly when you started as well. Like you say, you're the only link. I know we've got a lot of other kind of channels and platforms now, but obviously, it's a huge job for anyone following a local club.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to respect that responsibility, really. I mean, I think I understood what the club meant to the fans and what the fans wanted out of our coverage, hopefully. And, you as you say, you do your best to sort of navigate your way through the middle of it all. Recognise when certain things needed to be said. Other times, people at the club would take you into the confidence, and you respect that confidence. And so, you don't go breaking, confidentiality and things like that. If someone's told you something off the record, then that's it. It's off the record. But you can use that, of course, to steer stories in a certain way and get information out there in a different way, but with a fair, idea of what the truth is.
Definitely. And Tom, I've peppered Mel a little bit. Is there anything you want to ask him before we get stuck into his questions?
No, I am just excited to go through these questions with Mel, because there's some proper juicy stuff in here, and just I'm just really excited to hear some of these stories as well, Mel.
Okay.
Definitely. Well, so yeah, for listeners, so how it works is we've got 9 questions that we've asked Mel about his Huddersfield Town and what it means to him, and we're going to start off with question 1, which is his first game. So, Mel, you've got 2 answers here. But yeah, talk us through your first game. What was it like?
Yeah, the first one that I remember going to was, I think it was 1968. It would be, and it was reserves. The reserves played on a Saturday afternoon, and so I went with my next door neighbour, who was a big Town fan, a guy called Albert Downs, who used to work down Leeds Road at LB Holidays. So people who worked there might have remember the name Albert Downs. He was head of one of the labs, I think. And Albert was our next door neighbour, and he took me to a match against Everton reserves on a Saturday afternoon. And the big thing that I remember from it was Everton had a player called Alan Whittle who wore white boots. And this was the first time anyone had ever seen white boots. It certainly wasn't the first time I'd ever seen them. And very shortly afterwards, they really caught on, and people like Alan Ball, the World Cup winner, started wearing them, and Hinton, who was at Derby at the time, people like that. And they caught on very quickly. But Alan Whittle was the first guy who I remember seeing white boots, and it was in that match against Everton at Leeds Road. And then I think it was the following season, the first team game that I saw from memory, which I think I put down as Bolton, didn't I? Which Town won. And I remember standing on the open end. I don't remember a great deal about the game at all, I must admit. But I do remember standing on the open end, which is where a sort of regular place was at the time. And then in the big season, the 69-70 season, Frank Worthington, Jimmy Lawson, Trevor Cherry, Royal, and that side, when they won promotion as champions of the second division, I remember standing on the open end. I think it was one of the early games against. It might even have been in the top flight. Standing on the open end when the first season in the top flight, and I think they played Forest, and the Forest goalkeeper was a guy called Jim Barron. and a Town player had a shot, and it came quite near to us, but the guy standing next to us half volleyed the ball back onto the pitch. But unfortunately, his shoe went with it and landed in the 6-yard box. He's got some of those slip-on shoes on. And it landed in the 6-yard box, and Jim Barron just picked it up and put it in the back of the net, like with those little bags that the goalies had in those days, and stuck it in the back of the net. And then he took the goal kick, booted it up the other side of the field. Then he turned around with a big smile on his face and went and got the shoe out. The play was up the other end, got the shoe out the back of the goal and threw it back to the guy. And all the Town fans on there thought he was great, thought it was a terrific moment. So I remember that very much, about standing on the open end and Jim Barron with a shoe. But yeah, my early, those were the days just before that promotion season, getting to go and watch Town, and then obviously started going with family and what have you. So it was it was a really exciting time to be a kid back then.
No, and it was quite. Sorry, Brady. I was saying it was actually quite a good couple of years on it as a Town fan around then. Was it?
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. I mean that side with Terry Poole and Jeff Hutt, Dennis Clark, the other fullback. Then you got Roy Ellam and Trevor Cherry as the centre backs. Jimmy Nicholson in midfield. Jimmy McGill, Frank and Jimmy Lawson up front. Steve Smith. Bobby Hoyd, Colin Dobson on the wing. They were all terrific players. And, they were a very, very good side. I mean, there weren't many changes, I don't think, all through that season. And, they deservedly won the title. They were a really good side to watch. Very popular team. Obviously, it was very difficult in the top flight, very similar to what happened to the 2017-18 team. It was a big jump up, a couple of players left, and it didn't quite work out. And then obviously we had the horrors of the 1970s to follow, unfortunately, until Mick Buxton took over. But it was a great time to be a Town fan. I still vividly remember being on the East Terrace when they paraded the trophy against Watford on the final match of the season, and all those lads running around with the trophy in the air. It was a terrific atmosphere, and they were a very much loved team. They certainly were.
Definitely. And obviously you talked about the 68 and 69 there. So how old were you at this point, Mel? And were you into football before then? I know you said your next door neighbour took you, but had it been on your radar, or was it kind of a new experience?
No, very much so. I love football. Yeah, I played at junior school and what have you. I was born in 58, so I was like 10, 11 years old. So it was all starting to really register with me at the time. So that was really good. And it was an exciting time for football anyway in this country. FA Cup final day was the big day, of course, back in those days. But being a Town supporter, they were terrific days and a really good team. And it's nice actually to go down there these days. You still see Roy Ellam very regularly, Jeff Hutt as well. They're always down there. Still very much connected to supporting the club. Quite a few of them have passed on, obviously, unfortunately, in the last few years, but there's still plenty of them still around. And they're always very welcome when they go back to watch Town matches, and the supporters always having pictures taken with them and all. It's great that there are so many people around who still remember them playing.
No, definitely. We'll come on to question 2, which is your favourite game. Obviously, you got quite a few games to pick. Were there any before we get your answer? Were there any honourable mentions that didn't make the final cut, or am I putting you on the spot now?
There are a lot of honourable mentions, to be fair. There was some really good. I mean, the Blackpool. Funnily enough, the Blackpool away in 94-95, the first game of the season when Town won 4-1, I think it was. That white kit with the black sleeves. Do you remember it? That match then at the start of that season, I thought, wow, this could be a really good season. And obviously it did work out that way. The playoff final against Sheffield United, that penalty shootout with Smithies and then their goalkeeper, blasting it into orbit. That was a really memorable game as well. The playoff final in '95 when Boothie scored, and then obviously Chris Billy. It was that was a fantastic occasion, obviously to win at Wembley for what was the first time, I think. So that was really good. And then, more recently, some fantastic matches in the Premier League. The start to that first Premier League season was astonishing, wasn't it? The Palace game, and then Newcastle at home, and beating Man United, that sort of stuff. They all stick in the mind from much more recently, don't they? But yeah, the playoff finals, there are some that aren't memorable, aren't they? The final at Cardiff was a very, very ordinary game, but finished in a penalty shootout, and we all remember the celebrations because Town went up at the end of. I could have picked that as my favourite season as well, because it was such a, to start from nowhere really with 7 or 8 players in training. I think there were 8 debutants at the start of that season under Jacko. With a very young team, and obviously 2 or 3 sort of experienced players who were around the group as well. But to take it from just basically be fished out of basically for administration and survive by the skin of your teeth, and then to be going up with a very young team under Jacko, who did remarkably well at the club twice, the Great Escape seasons, and then to get the team promoted, that young team at Cardiff was fantastic. So I could have picked that. So there are an awful lot of matches. We'd be sat here talking for ages just about matches, probably, if I could bring some of the others to mind. But the one that I have chosen is one has always stuck in my mind since that day, which seems really odd because it was just a bog standard league game.
Yeah, so to talk us through that. So what was your choice in the end? Like you say, you had plenty to choose from, but I'm intrigued to see why you've picked this one.
My choice in the end was a 4-4 draw at Bury in September 1991. And the reason for choosing it really was that Town were 4-0 down, maybe within half an hour. They were 4-0 down. Liam Robinson, former Town player, was in that Bury team. I think he might have scored the first goal, actually. And at 4-0 down, you sort of think, well, that's that. What on earth's going to happen? But the team, they got a goal just before half-time. Ewan Roberts scored just before half-time. And you thought, well, that's okay. At least they've got a goal on the board, and wonder what's going to happen second half. Well, second half, the crowd that I remember, the Town fans, had the biggest influence that I could remember on the outcome of a game. They absolutely roared their heads off, got the team on the front foot, never stopped chanting and singing, never stopped willing the ball into the net. And Phil Starbuck scored one. So it was 4-2, but it still looked like Town were going to lose because I think there were only 4 or 5 minutes left. It was still 4-2. And then Starby scored again, a real beauty. And then in stoppage time, it was a cross from the right. I think it was Simon Ireland, the sub, who come on, who crossed it from the right-hand side. And Ewan was up at the back post and nodded it in. And it was just pandemonium among the Town fans. It really was.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic afternoon. And I think I said in my report that I said, when we were talking about man of the match, I said there were 2,300 of them behind the goal because it was the fans who really did make that happen. And it was just fantastic, and I've never forgotten it. It was a really brilliant comeback. And the team, of course, went on to good things. They got in the playoffs and unfortunately didn't quite make it, but I think possibly we're going to talk a little bit more about that further down the line. But Ewan was a really great goal scorer. He was down at the stadium not long ago towards the end of last season, covering the Swansea game for Welsh speaking radio, and he always finds time to come and have a chat. He's a really lovely guy. But I think he scored 34 goals that season, something like that. Set a new post-war scoring record anyway. Won the Golden Boot. I think he had 20-odd league goals. And fantastic striker, really good. And it was just a shame that they didn't quite go on and reach Wembley. But maybe that's a story for a little later.
It was I mean, with me and Brady, we're not there, but the videos of it, when people mention limbs these days, like you said, when that fourth goal goes in, Mel, it looks absolutely carnage behind that goal.
It was, yeah. I know people who were in there, and they said that it was the best sort of atmosphere and experience that they could remember. But you could feel it all around the ground. It was almost a sort of emotional thing, you know. You really were dragged into it because it was just unfolding in front of your eyes, and it kept happening. And the town fans were absolutely 100% rock solid all through the second half. They never stopped. And they really did have an influence on that result. I'm convinced of it. But it was absolutely brilliant, the atmosphere. And everyone who was there, anyone you talk to who actually was there, will tell you what a brilliant afternoon it was.
Yeah. And how many times do you reckon your match report changed during that game, or what you had an idea in your mind? I imagine it was quite a bit. Well,
we're fortunate in those days that you got some time to do it. It usually got wrote on a Sunday afternoon, so it wasn't a case of having to do it on the whistle back in those days. It would have changed incredibly, obviously. And when we were doing it, there were occasions when the late goals would fly in, and you basically rip up the top half of your story and start again as quickly as you could. But back in those days, we got a little bit more time to handle it, especially on a Saturday afternoon. There was no Sunday Examiner, of course, so you were aiming towards Monday night, Monday afternoon, should I say, Monday night. That didn't have to go through that, thankfully, on that occasion.
Oh, so that's why it's the favourite, because if that had happened when it was on the whistle, you'd be like, oh,
yeah.
It's there's a few other things to note from that. One of Town's all-time great kits they were playing in, goal or away shirt.
Yeah.
And it is the game that Dean Oil ran on the pitch, isn't it, as well, I think?
I'd forgotten all about that. I think it might be, yeah. But the kit one, certainly, yeah, that was an immensely popular kit, wasn't it? I think upstairs I've still got one of the prototypes. I think several other people claim to have a prototype, but I know I have got a prototype. One of the early ones that came off and wasn't actually chosen as a final design. But yeah, it was a great kit. Really, really good kit. And you do associate kits, don't you, with good times and big events. It's only natural. It's like the checkerboard one associated with the 10-1 defeat at Man City, you know.
Yeah.
Associated for a different reason, but you know, time moves on, doesn't it? But yeah, that was a belting kit.
Yeah, and on the game, obviously, you mentioned you travelled down with the Examiner photographer and the Yorkshire Evening Post reporter, John Drake. Like, what were you kind of all saying to each other after that? Were you just like, I imagine you couldn't believe it, like, you know, such an incredible comeback?
Yeah, it was an incredible comeback. It really was. I don't directly remember the conversation, but we always used to chew over what had happened in the matches on the way home. Julian was always, you know, great to chat to about what sort of pictures he thought he got, because, you know, until more recently they weren't able to just look and see what they were. They had to go back to the office and develop the film. So, you know, but he came up with some great pictures, did Julian. I mean, his pictures are part of Huddersfield Town history as well as, you know, the Huddersfield Examiner and the town itself. Took some fantastic pictures, and he got the great one of Ewan Roberts with the front teeth missing. There are several versions of him with that, because obviously he never played with them in. But we got a great picture on the back page. I remember after that in the red and black kit, the electric hoops kit, of Ewan with his big gap in his front teeth. Julian took some fantastic pictures. John travelled quite a lot with us, John Drake, to the matches in those days. Sadly, no longer with us, but Yeah, he used to travel a lot, so we did some long away trips together. And various other reporters joined us along the way, and photographers as well. But Julian did the vast majority of the time when I was directly covering town. You know, some of those pictures are etched in the memory forever, aren't they? So it's yeah, it was good to have someone who was so talented as a colleague.
Definitely. Well, I suppose we'll move on to your third question now, which is we asked you for your favourite player. I mean, I'm just really curious because obviously you talked a lot about Ewan Roberts, but it's that you've not gone for Ewan. You've gone for someone else, and admittedly before me and Tom's time. But I just want to know, you know, what is it about this player that you just absolutely love and down as your choice?
Yeah, I mean, I've chosen Malcolm Brown, the right back from the Mick Buxton era. Again, played in a really entertaining football team. You know, Robbins and Fletcher up front. There was Dave Cowlin on the left-hand side, Malcolm on the right, Brian Stanton, Mark Lillis, people like that were around, Sutton and Hamby and co. The two promotion sides from late 70s, early 80s. And Malcolm was a key component of that. He was just a fantastic attacking right back. He could cross a ball better than David Beckham at full pelt, no doubt about that. Robbins and Fletcher, you know, fed on it all the time, but so did the team. They knew that if they put the ball in that certain area, Malcolm was going to be onto it. He was quicker than most. He was a good defender as well. He was, his right foot though was just perfection. He was brilliant, and he played 259 consecutive matches. You can't imagine that's ever going to get beaten, can you? It's never going to get beaten in this day and age. Nobody's going to play 5 seasons without missing a game. So you know, he was just a brilliant player in that 79-80 promotion side, which I was able to watch as a fan. So obviously, I was watching as a fan at the time, and they were brilliant to watch. They really sort of got the pulse ticking again for Huddersfield Town after what had been pretty much a decade of in the doldrums. And so they really hit a button with the fans. They were exciting to watch. They were successful. They scored tons of goals. Obviously, Rob Stewart's book has documented all that, the 101 Club. They were really an exciting team to watch. Malcolm just was my favourite player from them. And I was fortunate. Obviously, he went away for 2 seasons to Newcastle. Newcastle bought him. And unfortunately, when he went up there, he ruptured his Achilles tendon and didn't play much at all. I don't even think he played 40 games for Newcastle in the time that he was up there. But I remember Steve Kindon saying to me once that he firmly believed that if Malcolm Brown hadn't got injured at Newcastle, he would have gone on to play for England. He thought he was that good. He thought he would have had an England chance. But obviously it didn't happen. And then Malcolm, he came back to town in 1985, which coincided with my first season covering them for the Examiner. And I think he had another 3 or 4 years back with town, but I got to know him a little bit, obviously at that time, and he was still a terrific player. One of the ones who, you know, Mick Buxton would trust him to have a drink. He'd let him have a drink before, you know, a couple of halves before a match, you know, Friday evening before a Saturday match, because he knew he needed it to relax and get to sleep. So, but yeah, Malcolm was a fantastic player. I think he got 4 successive nominations in the team of the season, something like that.
That's what I mean, Mel.
And I know he was player of. I think he was player of the year at town in the promotion season, I think. So yeah, just a terrifically exciting player to watch and part of a really good attacking team that are very fondly remembered still to this day. So you know, it was I picked Malcolm because of that. You know, and it's been a joy to watch so many decent players down at town over the years, you know, and obviously Booth is everyone's favourite. You know, there's some great local lads who've come through the team and done well, and people fondly remember them. But for me, Malcolm was my favourite Town player, so I thought that might be a little bit different to some of the choices you might get going forward with the pod.
It's a great choice. It's a great choice. I mean, I was lucky enough to work with Rob on his book. I did some illustrations for it, and so it's one side I do know. You know, I wasn't around then, but I know a bit about him, and like the stories about Malcolm Brown are incredible. Like it is quite amazing that we had him for so long before he went to Newcastle. Like you said, 4 seasons in a row in the team of the season for the league is incredible. And it is a shame with that injury at Newcastle because what a player. It sounds like he
was. I mean, you know, those are his peers who were voting for that team as well.
Yeah.
So clearly, everyone who played against him thought he was a great player. And you know, the quality of some of those crosses were just ridiculous. So yeah, it's very happy memories of watching Malcolm play, and also of that team. You know, many of whom are still around, and you know, are still in touch with everyone.
Yeah, and you mentioned about, you know, getting to know him professionally, because like you say, when he rejoined after his spell at Newcastle, what was that like? Obviously, like you say, he's your favourite player, but you know, it sounds like you got to know him a little bit. How was that?
Yeah, I mean, Malcolm was terrific to interview, and if there was anything he thought that you hadn't done correctly, he'd let you know as well. So you knew exactly where you stood. With Mally and with a lot of those players from that era. You know, the first match back from Newcastle was the first match I covered, which was against Millwall at home, and Dale Tempest scored a hat-trick to kick off the season with a win. And you know, Dale is still a good friend of mine, known him for a long time, and so you do tend to stay in touch with you know, these people one way and another. You know, and I think that, you know, they do tend to remember who the evening newspaper reporter was, because you know, they used to get the papers delivered down to the training ground, so they'd always be reading what you'd said about them, and then later on, obviously, when the marks came out, and when we started adding the player markings to it all, that added another level of intrigue. So yeah, it was they were happy times. When the marks came out, I think I gave Andy Morrison, I think I gave him a 6 at Norwich, and he was very, very unhappy. He thought he was man of the match, and should have had a 9 or something like that, you know. And I got wind that he was after me, so I managed to avoid him for about 6 weeks, just till he calmed down slightly. But inevitably he caught up with me and let me know his feelings. But yeah, it was it was lovely to know some of these fellas, and it's great to, when you don't see them for a long number of the years, and you've still got a sort of common theme to talk about. It's really nice. Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, you talk about player ratings. Obviously, that's an interesting one. Like, did you get anyone on the flip side? Anyone was like, "Oh, I think you've been a bit generous there, Mel." Or I imagine, knowing fan bases, I bet you got accused of having favourites and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course you did. Yeah, you did get accused of having favourites, but I just used to do it along a sort of a straightforward sort of, what mark would you give to the team, and then work upwards or downwards from there on who you thought had a decent sort of game. So that was my basic rule of thumb, to be honest. But obviously you're not going to please everyone, and especially when, you know, you're giving low marks, at times people would get a bit upset. But more often than not, they took it on the chin and accepted, you know, that maybe they hadn't had that good a game. So that's why the marks weren't too good. Then you get other people saying, "Why do you always mark them so high? There aren't enough 1s, there aren't enough 2s," and all this sort of thing. I think one of the worst I did as a team was a cup tie against Bristol City at home. I think this might have been around your time, Tom, early 2000s. We lost 2-0 at home to Bristol City in a cup tie. You might be able to refresh my memory. And I thought it was an awful performance from start to finish, absolutely dreadful. And there were some 2s flying about in that one. And I don't think it went down too well among the squad, who were a bit reluctant to talk to me for a while. But there we go.
Sometimes they need that though, Mel, don't they? A bit of a kick up the backside.
Absolutely, they need to know if they're trying to ignore it, what the fans are thinking, because you at the very least you expect is people to go out there and give 100% and do their best. And I remember on that particular occasion, it just to me didn't look like they cared, and I wasn't going to put up with that, let alone the fans. So there are occasions when you've got to really hit the nail on the head and say, look, this just isn't good enough.
Well, that's it.
And take it from there.
When you think of how things have changed now with social media and all that, I mean, you back when it was lovely print in paper, you were almost the voice of the fans that maybe the players didn't hear other than on the terraces during the game. Because, I mean, you had your forums, didn't you, down at the Mac and all that. But other than that, it's not as it's a lot more intimate now. You can pretty much tell a player anything these days with social media and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if people wanted to make a point, they used to have to write a letter to the newspaper. Yeah. Now you can just go on your social media outlet and you're engaging with hundreds of Town fans immediately, aren't you? So it's changed completely to how it was. The biggest flood of objections we had from the fans was when they sold Marcus Stewart to Ipswich, and the paper was flooded with letters day after day. We had pages of them, and that really that showed you the level of upset there was about letting the talismanic striker go. So the times have changed, but the feelings and the passions are exactly the same.
Yeah, no, I could completely imagine. I mean, we were talking, obviously, before we move on, I'm interested because obviously fullbacks now, they're kind of, wing backs, they're very, very important in the game for attacking. And you talked about Malcolm here. I know it's a classic, completely different eras, different time, but do you think, from the sounds of it, it sounds like he would have done very well if he was playing in this sort of time? Because fullbacks are so crucial now, aren't they?
Yeah. I think Malcolm would have done a great job. He would certainly have given the opposition teams a second thoughts. They wouldn't have thought, we can press down that side all the time because nobody's going to hurt us. You were going to get hurt if you were caught out of position. You were going to get hurt, and so I think that a lot about not just fullbacks, like as you say, in today's systems they're increasingly important. But if you can give your opposite number a second thought about what he's going to do, then you've won half the battle already, haven't you? So Malcolm would have slotted very well into many of the teams we've had down the years, simply because he was good, he was quick, he could cross a ball, and he could get back to defend if he did get caught out of position, which wasn't very often, to be fair.
Yeah, well, no, excellent choice, Mel. We're going to move on to another question, which is one of my favourites. Actually, it's the my variant question. So if you had the opportunity to change anything from Town's history, any outcome, it could be a particular game, or keeping Neil, or because I know that's one we've got quite a lot recently as Town are now in League One. What did you go for? Because like you said, there's so many kind of what if moments, isn't there? So I'm really interested.
Yeah, there were so many. I mean, I could have gone for the 91-2 team because I thought they deserved to go up. The playoffs, Jacko's playoff when we lost to Barnsley, I think in the semi-finals. That was a real kick in the guts at the time. I would have loved to have seen that team at least have a shot at the final and at going up. There was Lou Macari took us to the playoffs as well. We lost to Brentford. That wasn't quite so clear cut, but it was still, he still felt hurt at the time. There are quite a few, but I did go for the 99-2000 team simply because we're talking about the top flight, flirting with the top flight again, and the season was such a good one as well. Really, in so many ways, it was only towards the end that things started to fizzle out. And they didn't make the playoffs. But at the start of the season, they brought in like Kenny Irons, who was great in the midfield. Chris Laquette, really big, strong centre back. Clyde Wynyard up front. Clyde came in, and so they'd got a really good side, and they clicked, and they were playing some great football. The first half of that season, it was fantastic. They really did play some good stuff. They beat Crystal Palace 7-1 at home, which you hardly ever hear anybody mention these days. But when you think about the quality that performance had, I think Wynyard got a hat-trick in that game. Stewie got a couple, I think. And I think they strung together something like 6 or 7 wins, all in successive wins. And they were right up the top of the league. I think we were at the top of the league in December, and so it was a really good side. And obviously, the thing that hurt everyone at the end was the fact that Stewie was sold in the February, and Ipswich ended up going up. Of course, he scored on his debut against Town. Ipswich ended up going up, and we ended up missing out, but they were still very much in with a chance of the playoffs with a couple of games to go, and I think we lost at home to Stockport from memory, and then the final game down at Fulham, which many Town fans remember, who went and we got stuffed 3-0, unfortunately, and it was a very bitter end to what had been a really good campaign, because some of the football they played, I think I wrote at the time, some of the football they played in the first half of that season was as good as anything we'd seen for 30 years. And, they were a terrific side. And I would have loved to have seen them just have a shot at going to the Premier League. Obviously, it had been a long time, even then, since Town had been, looking at the top flight. And obviously, we had to wait, 17 more years or whatever it was until we actually got the chance. But they were a good side, and they were, Steve Bruce did a good job managing them, and it was a shame that it ended up in bitterness and sort of sour reflection, because I thought they deserved a shot at the playoffs that year.
It was I think it's a great one to think about, isn't it? Because you think about what would have happened if we'd have got promoted. It was a really early stages of the Premier League, kind of where the money was coming in. We're not that long after having the new stadium as well. So, I mean, we're only a few years into the new stadium, and you're thinking
that's right.
You'd probably have attracted a few players there as well. And and we're going to, maybe it might be a spoiler alert here, we're going to touch on a certain Mr. Steve Bruce later, but you look at his career past that, if he would have taken us to the Premier League, what potentially could he have done in that league with the players that he might have been able to sign as well?
Yeah, that's what you wonder. That's like you couldn't have said it any better. That's exactly the way I sort of thought about it. I really would have loved to have seen them have a go at the top flight at that time, and where it would have taken the club. Yeah. It's and unfortunately the sort of wheels fell off fairly quickly after that, and we ended up getting relegated fairly quickly after that. But it would have been good to see where it could have gone.
Definitely. And I'm going to ask you a difficult question here. Let's say it did happen. How do you think they would have done in the Prem? I know there's a lot of change, and obviously we know from recent that you changed quite a bit, maybe not so much back in those days. Do you kind of, I imagine you may have been dreaming about what that could look like, but what do you think it could have panned out like?
I think they would have. I think they would have done okay. I don't think they would have come straight back down. I really don't, because they even after Stewie went, they were still winning games. It was only right at the end that they missed out. So I think they would have actually held their own, very much the way that David Wagner's team did in the first season. I think they would have been quite capable of emulating that.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, sorry to kind of rub salt in the
We'll
wound.
never know, of course, Brady, will we? We'll never know.
Yeah,
we'll never know, but we can dream, and that's better than actual facts in history. So okay, well. Sorry to pull you out there, Mel. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more about your questions. Hi, Tom. I think the listeners are really enjoying this podcast at the moment, don't you?
I do, Brady. It's extremely exciting and enthralling.
I would describe it exactly the same way. But do you know what would go great with this podcast? Insert product name here. I love insert product name here. It's really fun, and it helps keep delivering the show to all our town listeners.
Insert product name here has really helped me sleep at night and has given me the opportunities to be the person I am today.
Exactly, and the great thing for me is insert product name here has also given me a lot of highs. So not only does it help me sleep at night, it gives me the fuel and the energy to go about my day and deliver it in the best way possible.
One of my favourite things about insert product name here is it got rid of that rash that I've had for a few months now. So everything's looking good.
That's really good to hear. And what's great about insert product name here is not only that, but I can share it with all my friends. I've recommended it to people, and it's really helped them too. And whenever I'm thinking what can make an event or a social occasion even better, it's insert product name here.
Brilliant stuff. Yes. So, do you like that? Did you like that, listener? Well, you could be insert product name here. All you've got to do is drop me and Brady a message. Drop us a message on social media, or you can email us at
terrierpod@gmail.com.
And speak to us about sponsorship opportunities for this podcast. We'd love it if we could partner up with you and make sure we can keep bringing more amazing, exciting Huddersfield Town based content to everyone.
Yeah, and that's great. I'm not adding anything here, so we'll stop it there.
It really did get rid of that rash, though. It's done really well.
Yep, and I won't have any social occasion without it. Terrier@gmail.com. Okay, Mel, so we've come back from the break and we're going to carry on talking about breaking because we've asked you your next question, which is your first heartbreak. Now, I love these questions because obviously with football and, let's be honest, supporting a team like Town, there's a lot of stuff that can, go wrong and we could be upset about. But I think it's always really clear your first moment where, football breaks your heart and, the thing you love so much, like chews it up and spits it back out. So what is that moment for you?
I think I chose the 91-2 playoffs, didn't I? Yeah. We've already touched on the team that we're talking about, the one that had drawn 4-4 away at Bury, which was sort of Ewan Robertson, Phil Starbuck leading the line, Ife Anura, Jacko, people like that were kicking around. It was a really good team. Graham Mitchell at the back as well. Simon Charlton was still with us. Really good left back Simon Charlton went on to big things. And we'd got a good side in there, good midfielders. Kieran O'Regan never stopped running. Chris Marsden. Chris could control the game on his own with his left peg. He was really good. So they were a really good side. And they deserved the shot at the playoffs. They got Ewan up front, of course. We've talked about scoring goals for fun. But he also never missed a game, by the way. I don't think he missed a game in the entire season. I think he played 61 times or something like that. 60 or 61 games. Which might have been the first time any Town player had ever done that. I think it probably was. I think Steve Francis might have done it one season as well. But I think Ewan was the first. And he was a terrific leader of the side. They went down to Peterborough for the first leg of the playoff in 92. This was, I think, Ian Ross was in charge at the time. Owen Hand had been parted company with because they'd gone on a bit of a poor run after Christmas and couldn't find a win, really. I think they only won a couple in about 10 or 15 games, something like that. And they brought Ian Ross in, who was the assistant, to take the team into the playoffs. And they went down to Peterborough and they played so well. on the night. They really deserved to beat Peterborough by at least a couple of goals. And I think if he scored, and I think the other one was an own goal. And somehow Peterborough just managed to grab a couple of goals from God knows where. And but everyone was full of confidence that Town would do it coming back up to Leeds Road. And Phil Starbuck scored quite early on, and so everything was going swimmingly. But then they scored a couple of goals, and all of a sudden the dream had gone. And it seemed so hard at the time because Town hadn't been to Wembley since before the Second World War, and they were within touching distance of it again. And I know it wasn't long coming after that before the team actually went to Wembley again. But at the time, it just felt like a massive opportunity missed, not just to go to the Twin Towers, but also to win promotion, because they were a very good side and they were capable of winning promotion, and it didn't quite happen. So that really hit a lot of people. That particular night at Leeds Road, and the fact that all the promise of the season had dissolved in a few minutes, really.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a really good one because, like you say, it's like on the cusp of something. It's not like obviously for me, I think it was younger. It's when a player gets sold, but I think that's it, isn't it? Like it's so close, and then it's just taken away. I mean, how were you kind of feeling when that all happened? I bet you must have been absolutely gutted.
Very much the same as the fans. I just thought it was so sad that, from memory, it was the Wembley thing that was as much of a draw as promotion at the time, because, a couple of generations at least of Town fans had never had the chance to see their team at Wembley. 1938 was the last time before that, and we're talking now in the 1990s. So it had seemed an awful long time. And it seemed like it would never happen. And I think that just added to the angst of it all, as much as missing out on promotion, to be honest.
Mm. Yeah.
Peterborough went on to win it, didn't they? They beat Stockport in the final.
Yeah, they went up, yeah.
I mean, I just, this is one that my family go on about. I mean, it's a bad one. The Town fans coined it Black Thursday, didn't they? That defeat, because it was such
I think they did,
depressing kind of defeat.
It really was. If you want to talk about emotionally damaging, you recover from these things, but at the time, it really did feel like that. And they were such a popular team, and everyone suffered along with them. I think there was a close bond between that team and the fans, and everyone felt it when it didn't happen.
And I think that obviously then we go on to lose to the Peterborough in that playoff final at Old Trafford. Then you do think about the celebrations after us and Barnsley sent them down, and I think there was a lot of kind of relief from Town fans in that stadium that day, just getting one over on Peterborough for once.
It did seem like they'd become a big bogey team for us, didn't it?
Massively,
I mean that obviously was another disappointment at Old Trafford, when hopes were high that we could get over the line, and obviously it never happened. We never really got to grips on the day, and that was another sad occasion, really. But the playoffs were becoming a regular thing at that time, weren't they? We were getting the semi-finals and finals, and eventually, of course, a couple of years later, it happened. So it was a sort of gradual progression in the first years of Dean Hoyle.
Absolutely, and we've talked about your heartbreak there and Black Thursday as it was dubbed. But let's be a bit more positive now, because it's your favourite manager. I'm not surprised by this answer, and I think it'd be an answer a lot by fans that we'd ask on here. But I want to know why this person in particular is your favourite manager, Mel.
Well, Neil Warnock obviously is my choice. In his first spell at the club, obviously there were 2 Wembley appearances and a promotion. So from that point of view, it was an exciting time to cover the club. And in the middle of all that, there was moving ground from Leeds Road to the new stadium. So it was a fantastic time to be covering the club and be associated with the club. But to have someone like Neil as the manager who made everyone feel a part of it, to really feel engaged with everything that was going on. I was lucky enough to be included in, nights out and, club sessions and stuff like that. They had to, but all the staff and people like that were involved, and I was dragged along as well. It wasn't, do you want to come? It was, you're coming, be at X time, So that's the way it was. And the spirit and togetherness around the place at the time was just fabulous. It really was. And the first season, the 93-4 season under Neil, was pretty poor. I mean, it looked like they were going to get relegated at one point. And I remember, I think it was certainly after a match against Brighton at home, and I think we'd lost 3-1 or 3-0, 3-1, I think. And I think that was like the third defeat in 4 games, and it was getting a little bit edgy. And I sort of thought, I'm going to have to ask some serious questions here, because if things don't change very quickly, we're going down. And I remember we used to interview the managers at the top of the Leeds Road tunnel in those days. The changing room, the doors down to the changing rooms were at one side of the main entrance, and they came out of there, and we just used to wait at the top there, at the top of the old tunnel. And I remember Neil coming round, and he stood where the doors were at the top. There was a door and there was a fire extinguisher on the wall, and we sort of penned him in, and he went to he only asked 2 or 3 questions, and then he sort of went as though he was going to go, and I sort of shifted round to block him in so that he couldn't go anywhere. And then myself and other people started asking him about, how serious the situation was, how confident he was that he could turn things around. And not long after that, maybe only a couple of weeks, we went over to Stockport in the Autoglass Trophy. No one was expecting to win, because only a couple of weeks beforehand, Stockport had hammered us 3-0 in the league, and they were a very good team at the time. Very good. And went over to Stockport and managed to win 1-0 with a goal by Ian Dunn. And everything from that moment onwards changed. I think the team only lost a couple of games towards the end of the season. They went up to Carlisle and won in the semi-finals of the Autoglass, having pumped them 4-1 at home. Went up there and soon found themselves 2-0 down, and it was another nail-biter, and went to a massive amount of added time. I think it was 11 minutes, which now seems like nothing, but in those days it was unheard of. You never got more than 2 or 3 minutes. But they managed to hang on and get through to Wembley, and it was a wonderful time, because there were, a lot of fans went down there, took the opportunity to go and see the team at Wembley. I was lucky enough to be invited on the team bus to Wembley, and to see all the town fans along the front of the stadium. That is something that I will never forget. I promise you, I will never forget it. It just said everything about what the club meant to the fans, and still does mean to the fans, obviously. But to see just a complete and utter awash with blue and white was just amazing. And it was a shame that the game didn't live up to things. Went to a penalty shootout, which we lost. We're not used to saying that, are we?
I know.
But we lost the penalty shootout. And it was all... immediately after that match is when Neil invited me to go on the bench, which I think I sent you guys a picture, didn't of me sat on the bench at Cambridge. And he invited me to go on there and write a piece about what it was like to be on the bench at a football league game. So I did that, which was a great opportunity. So we'd gone from Wembley to sitting on the bench, and then the next weekend was leaving Leeds Road, which obviously was, a very emotional time for a lot of people. And so the last match at Leeds Road, again, huge occasion. to remember, and brilliantly reflected in that video, the final whistle video, which what an astonishing piece of work that was by Simon Normington and Will Venters, Doug Thompson. Just a brilliant video. So everything was happening. It was brilliant at the club at the time. Everyone was disappointed about missing out at Wembley, but then obviously we've got the new stadium to look forward to. The crowds automatically doubled from going across the road. I don't know if you've ever looked at the stats, but the crowds went from 5,500, 6,000 to 11,500, 12,000 overnight. And it helped, obviously, that it was a successful season in the new stadium. And, that team with, Ronnie and Boothie up front and Bully in the middle and, Sinnott and Scully at the back. They were a terrific side and went on to Wembley. And, another thing which makes Neil a favourite is the superstitions that he had. So directly involving me, because I'd been on the team bus the previous season when they'd lost at Wembley, I did not go on the team bus to Wembley for the playoff final. And the other thing about that was that getting to the playoffs, I think 2 or 3 games from the end of the season, Town needed a point. And we were playing Cambridge away from home. And apparently, I'm told this by Dave Wilson, who was the physio at the time, was a great guy. And he said Neil was fidgeting around because he knew something was different to the previous season. Dave Wilson reminded him that I'd been sat on the bench the previous season doing this piece about what it was like to be on the bench. And so 2 minutes before kickoff, the press room at the back of the Cambridge stand, which was like a little glass box, the door slid open and it was Dave Wilson saying, "The gaffer wonders if you'll come and sit on the bench again," because we needed a point to get in the playoffs, and the previous season they'd won the game 5-4. So I put us off down and sat on the bench again. Town drew 1-1, got the point they needed to go in the playoffs. So that's my claim to fame for helping Town win promotion.
Oh, well, there you go. I think I'm allowing that. I'm approving that. What was it like sitting on the bench? I know you covered it, but yeah, just I'm really intrigued. I mean, there's loads to unpick in what you were saying there. I'm sure we'll get into it, but yeah, I'm just curious. Like that must be the dream, right? As a Town fan, to get and sit in the bench.
Absolutely. I mean, I was never going to achieve it as a player, so it's certainly the next best thing to actually get the opportunity to do it. And for 2 league games, it was. You realise the sort of pressures that they're under, just little things, because, Neil was up and down out of the little box thing and he was stood on the edge and he was pointing and he was shouting, and it brings home to you. And some of the conversations that were had on there sort of bring home to you the pressures that they're under to get a result on every given sort of day. And, people talk about, Huddersfield Town. To me, every time Huddersfield Town play a match, it's a big match. It's Huddersfield Town, for crying out loud. This is the hopes and dreams of thousands of people, and every single match matters. So, it was a lovely insight to see what was going on with the players and the conversations that were had before they were sent on, why they were sent on. It was a very interesting insight, yeah.
Cambridge playing staff must have thought, who's this bloke that Neil Warnock's brought 2 times in a row? Who's this football genius that he keeps putting on the bench?
He's talking about Gary Clayton.
I mean, that's great, that, Mel. What a story that is. I mean, Neil, what he's done at Huddersfield Town is incredible, isn't it? I think just things that you've touched on, like people go on about managers being dinosaurs and stuff, but there's no one like Neil Warnock. What he was doing, what you've touched on, no one else will have been doing it before he was doing it. Getting everyone involved, getting people having you on the team bus down is amazing. Like how many how many managers would do that kind of thing, especially these days as well?
Yeah,
very rare.
yeah.
You get that.
You don't get
that
close
kind of
to them
insight.
these days. We
No.
we could get close to the players. I was very close to those lads in those couple of seasons. Similarly, afterwards with Jacko's teams, you create bonds with these lads, and you can't get that close to them anymore. There's always that. It's always sort of a little bit more sanitized, unfortunately. You can't just collar them down the corridor and say, "Give us 2 minutes." It doesn't happen anymore. But yeah, I mean, he did a fantastic job. I remember Steve Chicken asking me, from We Are Terriers, asking me when Neil came back, what would it be like? And I said it's the best possible thing they could have done. And for me, I don't call that the great escape. That's the greatest escape.
Yeah.
Because we were dead and buried and paid for the wake, hadn't we, before Neil came back?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden there was a ray of hope, and I knew exactly what he would be like in galvanising people, and the fans were straight back on board, weren't they? And it was a wonderful achievement to stay up, to get those points against Sheffield United, and stay up, and the celebrations that followed it were wonderful. But Neil just did exactly the same thing. He knows how to manage people, fantastic motivator, get everyone involved, and we saw it work again. And it's just a shame last season that it wasn't left a little bit longer before they decided to make some changes.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what he does down at Torquay now as well, like with the role he's got, and what kind of stuff he's going to implement there. Because Torquay, a team that have dropped really far. I mean, not a small club for that area of the world as well. So hopefully he can.
We were picked to promotion by them, I think, weren't we? In the seasons we've been talking about. Yeah, so it just shows. Yeah.
And you talked about celebrations there, Mel. And you mentioned it yourself, but nights out with the team. I think Lee Morris shared the picture, but you doing karaoke with Neil. I want to know more about this. Like, can you remember what you were singing? How was Neil at karaoke? I imagine charismatic as ever, particularly.
He was pretty good actually. Yeah, and a lot of the lads. I mean, I was shocking, I have to say. Even Ronnie was better than me. I think the pictures with Ronnie's got his arm around me, and we're both bellowing into a microphone. And I think Gary Clayton and Pat Scully, I think, is the other one on the same picture. But yeah, this was what Neil did. We're going for a night out, and I think that particular one was at Johnny's. But I know there was I think they played a friendly one of the seasons down at Torquay. A friendly in the middle of the season. Played a friendly at Torquay. But what? One of the nights was at his mate's pub and a darts match. So it was it just incredible in the middle of a season. But at the end of the day, what does the man do? He wins matches. He wins promotions.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the way he does it.
Yeah.
No,
Genius.
Yeah. Well said. We're going to come on to your next question, though, Mel, which is your unpopular opinion. This is something that you just maybe couldn't get on with. It could be a player manager or something that's kind of considered in the town folklore as this, and you actually don't disagree with. Tom and I know from doing the podcast we have unpopular opinions, but I'm really curious to see what yours is, and I think it's a very interesting choice actually, and a good one to kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually touched on a lot of it, haven't I, already? And it seems to be that certainly a lot of people that I know have hold a very dim view of Steve Bruce and his time at Town. And I think that basically entirely stems from what happened with Marcus Stewart being allowed to leave. The season, as we've said, was absolutely fantastic. The first half of the season, Town were beating all comers and playing some great football with a very good team. And unfortunately, obviously Stewie was sold. I know Stewie said that Steve never made any great effort to keep him. He just presented him as though it was moving on to Ipswich as a fait accompli, which I think that Steve's basic take on that was that he knew that nothing was going to change. That decision had been made, and there wasn't anything he could do about it. So he just presented it to Stewie as it was. But Steve's sort of legacy, if you want to call it that, I know he's only here a short while, was sort of tarnished by that. And I think it's a shame that a lot of that, the football that team played in that season, went by the wayside simply because of Stewie leaving, and the fact that they missed out on the top 6 and finished 8th. In the championship. What would we give for an 8th place finish in the championship these days? It's if you think about it like that, and I really do think that team would have done well. And unfortunately, of course, the following season it sort of all fell apart. I think Clyde Wynyard had a bad car accident, didn't he, right at the beginning, and never. I don't think he played a game, and they just couldn't buy a win. I think they only had one win before December or something like that. It was ludicrous. And Steve got the bullet, which happens in those circumstances. And Lou Macari took over, and unfortunately we weren't able to stay up despite Boothie coming back. We lost on the last day of the season to Birmingham at home. And sad times indeed, and obviously followed very closely then by the administration and all the rest of it, and then that wondrous season under Jacko when we went back up. But yeah, I just think to the sort of memories of what was a very good team have sort of become tarnished, really, and I don't think that really that's deserved.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Tom, I know you're keen to kind of talk about this because we've had guests on and people still feel quite strongly about Steve.
It is. I mean, I think I vaguely remember watching like I'm very young. I went to a few games around this, but I wasn't season ticket holder age and can't really remember this season that much. But it was like soon as like my dad and my uncle like Steve Bruce, look what kind of thing. So it is that. Amongst the fan base, isn't it, Mel? It is very much like that.
Very, yeah.
You just
very
look at
Marmite figure. More don't like than do like. It's as simple as that. I got on well with Steve from a journalistic point of view. He was great to work with. He'd make himself available on a Sunday morning. He'd quite often be watching Alex playing for Man United's kids, and he'd be on the phone for half an hour, whatever I needed on a Sunday morning to get some fresh quotes for the Monday night paper. Yeah. We had a good relationship, and I think that team, that 99-2000 team, were very, very exciting side, and it did go pear-shaped because of what happened with Stewie. I said earlier it was the biggest reaction we ever had from the fans. In terms of negativity from the fans towards a particular player leaving. And that sort of coloured everything, the way fans felt towards the end of the season, obviously with Ipswich doing so well at the same time as well. I think that it's a shame that it ended up like that. I accept that it did end up like that, and that's how people feel. I don't think at the end of the day, really, that Steve wanted Stewie to go any more than anyone else did.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, like you say, I mean, like Tom was saying about Steve Bruce and how it brings out a reaction. That decision with Marcus Stewart, that brings out a reaction. It doesn't matter, how many times have we done a podcast over the years, Tom, and no matter whenever that gets brought up, there could be 15 and all like 50, they're like, so no, absolutely. We're gonna come on to your next question, which is your worst moment, and again, there's not to be the bearer of bad news, but Sporting Town, there's a lot of bad moments. Let's be fair, we are in the 3rd division of English football now as we record it, but again, I'm intrigued with this one. I wanted to know, is it recency bias for the one you've picked? I know you touched on something else, but you've tell us what you've gone for here.
I went for the 2 penalties at Wembley against Forest simply because I was there for the first time as a fan. I wasn't working anymore. I'd retired, so I went down as a fan to watch. and felt massively aggrieved by those two decisions. And obviously since then things have come out about VAR and the way it works and the protocols and what they can do and what they can't do. But I didn't think John Moss was a good appointment for the final anyway. In his final match before packing up, I thought that was a very, very poor decision. And then for Paul Tierney not to intervene on either of those decisions, when you look back at it, you just think, how can you not think, just come on, John, you need to have a look at this, at least have a look. And I just felt robbed. I think most Town fans did, didn't they? And I just felt it was very, very cruel to lose a match when two incidents like that had happened and VAR was in operation. So that's why I chose that. There could be a lot of things you could choose. I mean, I think I mentioned on the answers to you guys was the administration, wasn't it? Because that was a very worrying time. No one knew exactly what was going to happen to the club. They were massively in debt, which was really worrying. I think it was 20 odd million at the time in total. That's not including what was eventually written off. Sorry, including what was eventually written off. So it was an extremely worrying time, and it felt almost like 1919 again, and people were on the street rattling buckets saying we need to save our football club. And I thought the reaction to it was just wonderful, the way the fans rallied round and supported all the events, the town hall, the sports events and things like that. I thought that was just great. And, it really was a dark time for the club. They couldn't pay the players, they couldn't pay bills and all the rest of it. Even the council lent them some money at one point. So, they were dire times. And, Ken Davey bought them out of administration. Jacko got the team promoted and things perked up from there. And, before long we were in the playoffs virtually every year and winning promotions. So, it was the start of a really nice era for the club, but actually at the time very worrying. And, to think that, the club might actually go under was it's just unbelievable, really. But that's the way they were.
Yeah, I think particularly, it's like we talked about it a lot, but I mean, even when you look at teams that have gone to the wall now, like it's still a real, scary thing. Like you say, I can imagine at the time it was, although it's kind of like a result had been good. It was.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of teams in dire straits, aren't there? That I think people expected a lot more to have gone under by now, to be quite honest. But they seem to wrestle with these massive debts and move along. So yeah, it was close to the bone, was that for Town? It really was, and it at the time it was extremely worrying.
But I want to talk about these penalty decisions because I was there, and I know Tom wants to. I've still not got over it, and I'm sure Forest fans they would clip this or whatever. But I don't know if it was the same experience for you, Mel, but. I remember being like, oh, there's VAR, and like people looking around me like, oh, they'll check it. And obviously there was a bit of a delay, but yeah. I think what did me for that, and this is why it stings so much, is you didn't realize what the reaction like to people watching it was when you were in the ground at the time. So I remember coming out and I just like my phone caught up and I just loads of messages like, I can't believe this has happened. Like, how did you not like, wasn't just like you thinking, oh, everything. Huddersfield Town. It was just like, it was a scandal, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, because at the time in the ground, you were sort of caught up with what was going on, that you didn't really think about what the impact was. Sorry, throughout the country watching on, the biggest money game in football, and two really what seemed to be howlers didn't get picked up on. And that, I was very much the same. Afterwards, it was the only thing anyone talked about. And there was a genuine feeling, really, of being completely robbed. yeah, as a not even being in, not being involved in the coverage of it. Obviously, I just went away like the rest of the fans and thought, crikey, that's it for another year. But it really left a sour taste and question marks over VAR, which still really haven't been answered, have they? And why Tierney didn't get involved, I just do not know. There were, they would have seemed obvious ones to me, to be quite honest. Yeah.
It just feels like I say this because I get asked a lot by people who don't support Town, and that's like kind of the things that came to mind. It's like I always it just feels like that final's like an asterisk. Like I'm not saying we would have won the game, but it just feels like I don't know. It just feels a little bit like you'd never know. It is like the what if, isn't it? Because we might not have scored. I mean, knowing Town, they've not. I know recent seasons we've not been that great with pens, or we barely get pens awarded. So, but it just feels like you say. You can never know because but it feels not cheated.
It was a nothing at the game, really, wasn't it? Settled by an own goal, and neither team really creating much, and so there were two massive incidents in the 90 minutes. Two massive incidents, and for it to go against us like that, people say, well, they wanted Forest in the Premier League and all the conspiracy theories and all the rest of it, but to me, they were just two decisions that really needed looking at. And it didn't happen, and that leaves a sour taste.
Yeah. I think it says a lot that how many years ago is it now? 4 years ago. But you've Forest going on about their VAR problems this season, and you look under any of the comments. There's other fans saying, "Well, you got into the Premier League because Huddersfield didn't get there." Even Roy Keane brought it up on his podcast the other month, and it's like you said, it wasn't just Town fans who felt aggrieved by that. It was. I think everyone
it was a big talking point in football, and it's remained so simply because of the gravity of it. I think. I totally agree. It's been a talking point ever since.
Yeah. Well, I remember because I'm going to embarrass Tom here, but Tom rang me when, like you say, when I finally got a signal, and you'd had a bit to drink, Tom, hadn't you? And I think you were quite upset. So I'll always remember it for that. I won't reveal on the podcast, Tom.
I'll just say one more thing on that. I stayed down at Wembley, so on the morning after, I'm still down there having breakfast in the hotel, and it was full of Forest fans. And all they were talking about was, I don't care what happens next season, as long as we get more points than Derby did when they got relegated. And that is literally all they were talking about. Nothing else. They were only interested in beating Derby's low points total. So anyway, there we are. I just thought I'd finish on that.
No, that's fair. I've said this before, so you got me on a rant here, but I remember never seeing, this is why I don't like him. I've been to, a few finals and like playoff finals and stuff. I've never seen a fan base want to celebrate in front of opposition fans so much. Like I had people coming up to me, like celebrating in my face, and I was just like, it stings. It stings. I just
please go away.
I'm talking about probably like 40 people across a couple of hours, and I'm saying as if it's the entire Nottingham Forest fan base. But we'll move on because your final question, Mel, and this is a favourite and one we like to finish on, is favourite season. And there's so many you can choose from. Obviously, we were joking before we recorded. Oh, I bet everyone's going to pick 16, 17. But you've not picked that, but you've picked two seasons because they're linked. So I think because you're a legend, we'll let it pass through. But talk to us about your favourite seasons.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but the two Wembley trips were fantastic. I've already talked in some length about them, but to finish off with the promotion was fantastic because they were a really good team as well. Talk about the players. Steve Francis, really good guy and a terrific goalkeeper. Didn't miss many games. Really good keeper. Simon Trevitt, local lad, great character. Berger, fantastic lad. Tom Cowan, the punching celebrations in front of the terrace. He always celebrated after every win. Massively popular. I think he was successive player of the year, I think, wasn't he, around that time, or certainly in his time with Town. Darren Bullock, legendary midfielder, just a heartbeat of the team, really. And he was in there. We had Lee Duxbury at the time, who rarely gets a mention as a Town player, did good things with other clubs as well. But Lee was an important cog in that team. The two centre-backs, Scully and Sinnott, this was just post Peter Jackson. Jacko, we've mentioned him as what a fantastic job he did as a manager of the Great Escape in the 90s, and then promotion with that 2004 team at Cardiff against Mansfield, and then later going very close in the playoffs again. Terrific manager, but also being a great player for the club. Massive fans' favourite. I know it was before your time, you guys, but what a fantastic player. So it was post Jacko. We've got Sinnott and Scully at the back there. Then up front, obviously you've got Boothie and Jeppo, and just fantastic exploits. I mean, they got together as a partnership towards the end of the season before, when everything sort of started to come good and really clicked. And obviously that season, the promotion, the 95 season, they put a lot of defences to the sword, which was great to see. Chris Billy was in there, of course, scored the goal at Wembley that decided it all with that diving header. But popular lads around the team, Ian Dunn, Dunn had his own chant, didn't he? And great super sub type player. Johnny Dyson, very, very solid Huddersfield lad. Gary Clayton, who we mentioned previously, did a super job filling in that team, really did. And just a Warnock player, player. We'd had one the previous. Richard Logan had been there, scored in the Wembley final against Swansea, which was his first goal for the club at Wembley. And Richard Logan wouldn't have fitted into many non-league teams, but he certainly fitted into what Warnock wanted. And then obviously went down to Plymouth and won promotion again with Neil down there. So just a really popular set of lads. To talk about, rather than the two seasons linked together. That second season team, following on from the team that had lost at Wembley, were just a really good set of lads. And it was great to see Lee Sinnott lift that trophy at Wembley, even though he dropped the lid on his head. It was just a marvellous moment. I actually remember I stopped to actually watch and just take in the reaction of the fans and just see the celebrations rather than making notes and thinking about what I was going to do next. I thought, it's too good to miss this, Mel. Just take a minute out and soak it all in. So I tried to do that at all the playoff finals, to be honest, just to get a flavour of it and just think, this means a lot to the fans.
Incredible. No, I mean, that's great. I mean, it's absolute pick. And you kind of touched on it. Obviously it was around leaving Leeds Road as well, and how important it was in the new stadium. I suppose that, as someone who was just born, I do get, it does get talked about a lot, and it sounds incredible. But I imagine, to have that first season and like you say, win the promotion at the new stadium, that you must have felt like sky's the limit. Like it must have been an incredible feeling.
Yeah, it was a very exciting time for the club. They couldn't have afforded to stay at Leeds Road. It was crumbling, needed money spending on it. They had no money. In fact, they owed money massively. It was almost a perfect storm that there was a chunk of land just across the road that they could redevelop, get a futuristic looking stadium as it was at the time. Obviously the first match there was lost against Wickham, but after that it was just a string of successes really, and another really popular team. The atmosphere was good there. There weren't all four sides then, of course. The big end where the pool is hadn't been built then, but it was a really good season for Town, and just new pastures for everyone. Literally, you couldn't go back to Leeds Road and stand in the same place anymore. And go where your dad or your granddad had been, talk to all the same people on a Saturday afternoon. It was a whole fresh approach. Everyone had taken different seats in the stadium. They weren't necessarily with the same people on a Saturday afternoon anymore. And now, of course, your guys, your generations have all got their own memories at the stadium, and taking kids and grandkids. So it's the whole thing happens again. It's there's a massive connection now between town and the stadium, and that's wonderful. And it was a great time. There was so much going on at the club. But the stadium was the focal point of exciting times to come, and people bought into that.
What was it like going from covering at Leeds Road to then covering at the McAlpine? It was first, wasn't it? Or was it the Galfarm first, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the John Smith, wasn't it? It was the John Smith Stadium to start with, and then the Galfarm,
right, yeah.
and then sorry, John Smith, McAlpine Stadium.
McAlpine first, wasn't it?
McAlpine Stadium, then Galfarm, and then John Smith.
Yeah.
It's it was the press box at the old stadium was alongside the director's box, but it was just part of the main stand. Right, It was next to the director's box, but you're just in among the fans. Literally, the fans were sat directly behind you. And we used to have a little press room under the main stand at Leeds Road at the open end, which they used to use as a canteen for the players on during the week, training weeks. And that became the press room on a Saturday afternoon, but just really for refreshments. The after-match interviews were always done at the top of the tunnel. Going to the new stadium, there was a press room. It was quite small and tucked away, but it was there. And the press room over the years has moved around into various different places, simply depending on what commercial space they could sell on a match day. So the press room has moved around from downstairs, upstairs. It's been all over the place. It's now just as you go in through the players' entrance on the left-hand side, the first room there on the ground floor, which Boothie and Charlotte Hanvey and co have been using as an office in midweek, and Rachel been using it as an office midweek until they've now just done up the new offices. So, but that's been the Eleanor Haig press room, of course, as it's called in memory of dear Eleanor. And that's where we've used down there. The press box itself, as you'll be well aware, is just behind where the directors sit. And there are 3 rows, on each side behind there. It's actually quite tight. It could do with some fleshing out to give people a bit more room to work, but that's the way it's been for the last 30 years. And I think there are some talks of making changes and improvements, which is good. So yeah, it was totally different. It was quite futuristic at the time. It felt totally different to have a designated sort of press area. But the basic mechanics of covering the football, getting interviews, all that didn't change.
Did it change your
nice to have some success at the new stadium?
Did it change your feel of reporting at all, Mel? Do you know what I mean? Like, because you're saying at Old Leeds Road you had the fans right behind you. Do you know? Did you pick up anything from them, and then going basically in front of the directors at the McAlpine? Did it? I don't know. Were you picking different things up?
I don't think so particularly, because there are still fans at the side. And when things are going badly, they're quick to stand up and holler at the directors. So you still pick up, and also the boxes which are just behind the press box.
Yeah, true.
The fans in there shout and carry on. So I don't think from that point of view it made much difference, to be honest. I've certainly never felt so. And if the fans had something to say, the directors certainly heard it, because we heard it.
Well, that's good to know that they hear it there.
That's excellent, and I think very fitting to pick as his favourite seasons. Like you say, it sounds like an incredible time. But Mel, just before you go, obviously we gave you a lot of homework, didn't we? But it's been really great to hear, and I think we asked you to do your My Town mixtape, so the listeners can listen to that afterwards. And it's you've picked a song in relation to every question that we've asked you, but I just wanted you to kind of say how it was pulling it together, and maybe sell it to the listeners why you think they should give it a listen.
Yeah, I mean, some of the ones were, they weren't ones that came off the top of my head. I just thought, I remember at that time this was happening. A couple of them are quite personal. I mean, I picked my favourite goal, which we haven't talked about, which was Tony Carr's volley against Torquay, which was just one of those wow moments as a Town fan and even as a professional covering it. Just thought, wow, that is some goal. And Annie Lennox, Walking on Broken Glass, was around at the time, and that Annie Lennox we saw on holiday around that time. We went to in Cape Town. This was a 46664 concert, which was Nelson Mandela for the AIDS charities, and Annie Lennox was one of the acts. So were U2, Beyonce, The Cause,
Wow,
various people all on stage that night. And then Nelson Mandela landed in a helicopter and went on stage and made a speech. So any time I think of Annie Lennox, I think of that time when we were at the concert in Cape Town and Nelson Mandela came on and made the speech, and we saw some great acts. So that was why I chose the sort of the Annie Lennox one. Waterfalls was another one at the end by TLC, which is one that we holidayed in Kowloon and Hong Kong once, and the resident band at the Hard Rock Cafe played this as their signature tune. So anytime I hear that record, it takes me back to Kowloon and that particular time. So that's why I chose that. I had to choose some Meatloaf as well. So I had to get a Meatloaf record in there. Simply because I like songs rather than artists, but a great Meatloaf fan with the mullet and everything else. It had to be, I suppose, didn't it?
Yeah.
So that's why I chose that. And Hotel California was a record we often had on in the car when we were going to town matches as fans. We had the old Eagles tape on there, so that's why that's in there as well. And of course, the first one, Those Were the Days. Obvious connotations for my first time watching Town, and obviously the song that most Town fans associate with the club, which was, which is a wonderful song anyway. So I do hope that fans enjoy listening to them if they take the trouble. I think there's a good selection there.
Oh, I definitely agree. We'll include it as a link in the podcast description so anyone can go listen to it, because yeah, I think it's a great choice. But Mel, I think we've taken enough time from you today, but we just wanted to say thanks so much for coming on to My Town, and it's been great to hear your stories about Huddersfield Town, and I'm sure we could talk about it for another 2 hours, but you've got places to be.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you asking me on. It's very kind of you. Thanks, guys.
No, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Tom, anything you want to say before we shoot off?
Yeah, just thanks for coming on, Mel. I mean, you are a legend amongst Huddersfield Town fans. Like we've touched on kind of how media has changed and everything, but personally for me, growing up, reading the reports in the back of the Examiner every Monday, especially seeing what scores you'd given everyone, was a highlight.
Yeah. No, great stuff. Thanks very much.
No worries. Cheers, and we'll do it there. So yeah, tune in next time to hear the next episode of My Town. Okay, so Tom, we've just finished recording My Town with Mel Booth. I loved that. That was great hearing about it. Like the karaoke with Neil. Like, I think my favourite quote from that has to be, "It's Huddersfield Town, for crying out loud." I think that was incredible. But that was just so great to take a trip down memory lane with Mel, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think you forget kind of how important the Examiner was, especially when Mel was kind of doing his work for it, because it was almost the only source for a lot of people of like write-ups of matches and things like that. And when you speak to someone like Mel, who has been around the club for years, it makes you realise that like Town, they're a big club. They're a big club followed by a lot of people, and they're really important to a lot of people. So yeah, I love that, Brady. Some absolutely amazing stories and some really good insight from Mel, and pretty decent playlist as well. I'm looking forward to listening to that.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, you talked about player scores there. I'm glad. I'm glad I'm not him. I can't imagine trying to get cornered by a player after he's given him him a 6. Never mind. That's not that bad.
I know, because imagine doing some of those players from this most last season getting relegated. There'd have been a few ones in there, wouldn't there? Like, so yeah, I mean, some really good stories, and I mean, maybe further down the line we'll speak to Mel again, but not bad for a first guest, I'd say, Brady. That, wouldn't you?
No, I think it's going to be hard to top that, but we'll try. We'll try, listeners. And as we said, if you do want to listen to Mel's My Town mixtape, you can do. It'll be in the podcast description for your show notes there. Yeah, I think a really good one to start. And obviously we are a new podcast. We're on a good feed, a new feed, and a good feed as well. So I'm going to do all this stuff. But like, if you did enjoy this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you share it with anyone who you think might like it. Rate this podcast as well. I know it's all a bit annoying, but it really helps us, and more importantly, it gets it out there to town fans who we think, most town fans, I'd argue any town fan would enjoy that as a listen. So yeah, if you're not going to do it for us, do it for Mel, I would say. Yeah. But yeah, no, well, that's great. I mean, we've got plenty more planned in the series, haven't we, Tom? So yeah, we're excited to release them. They'll come out every week, and we are called the Still Smiling Podcast. This is the series My Town, but we have got a few other things planned, haven't we, Tom, that we're not going to reveal just yet. But yeah, there'll be plenty of interesting stuff coming out for sure.
Yeah, we have. So yeah, keep listening, keep posted. Follow us on all the socials. Yeah, we're doing the annoying plug now, Brady.
We are. Yeah. But no, it's good. We'll that was great. And we'll as the kids, like in pre-season stuff, we're the season loaded. We're loaded and ready to go for the rest of the series. So thanks again to Mel for that. And we'll be back for the next one to half an hour and not up the town. Oh, I can't use that. It's not our thing anymore. I don't know what to say. What do we go with? I will go with this. Thanks for listening. You listened to Mel Booth's My Town.
Keep smiling.
Keep smiling. Still smiling.